Okay. Good afternoon. I'd like to call our meeting to order. Good afternoon. This is our fourth meeting of the Legislative Committee for the Review and Oversight of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency and the Marlette Lake Water System. Today, the committee will hear presentations focused primarily on sustainable development and affordable housing issues in the Lake Tahoe Basin. Ms. Martinez, please call the roll.
Senator Daly, Senator Scheibel, Senator Titus, here. Assemblymember DeLong, here. Assemblymember Moore, Assemblymember Osborne,
here.
Assemblymember Watts,
here.
Chair Goulding,
here. Thank you. Before we begin, just to confirm, so we have a quorum, right? We have quorum. Yes. Before we begin, I would like to make several housekeeping announcements. Please note that the committee's solicitation for recommendations has been posted on our committee's website. The committee invites all interested parties to provide recommendations in writing for possible consideration during our final meeting and work session, which is currently scheduled for August 14th. That will be down in Carson City. Written suggestions for recommendations, along with appropriate background information, must be received by Friday, July 10th at 5 p.m. Submissions may be sent via email to tahoe@lcb.state.nv.us. In advance of the final meeting, a list of recommendations received will be compiled for possible consideration by the committee during that work session. Please note that submission of a recommendation to the committee does not guarantee that it will be considered during the work session. Additional details about submitting recommendations can be found on the committee's webpage. Meeting materials can be accessed on the committee's webpage located on the Nevada Legislature's website, and all materials are viewable when logged into your Nevada Legislature online account. You can create your own free account and sign up for electronic notifications related to the committee's activities on the Legislature's website. Please sign in at the door for those of you who are with us here today. And if speaking, please provide a business card to our secretary if you have one. When speaking, please press the mic button and state and spell your name for the record. We will have public comment period both at the beginning and end of the meeting. Public comment is limited to 2 minutes per speaker and will be timed. Members of the public may provide testimony in several different ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. Finally, I would like to remind everyone to please turn off your electronic devices, especially cell phones and laptops, and put them on silent mode during the meeting. And with that, we will begin public comment. If you would like to give public comment, please approach the table.
I assume this is the mic button. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the committee and Chairwoman Goulding for this opportunity to speak. My name is Richard Beatty, B-E-A-T-Y. I'm the president of the Brockway Point Homeowners Association in Kings Beach. I've been a property owner in California and the South Lake Tahoe and North Lake Tahoe area for 55 years, something like that. I was also a developer in Old Sacramento. I have a statement that I'd like to read, but I'd also like to preface it by commenting that the purpose of TRPA was to ensure equilibrium between the region's natural endowment and its man-made environment, and that this has been lost to some extent by our current TRPA in that they no longer actually have environmental scientists or in fact scientists of any kind serving on the TRPA board. It's primarily communication specialists, lawyers, and people in the public relations area of life. So this includes the Tahoe Prosperity Center, which I'd like to speak to briefly. TPC presents itself as a neutral nonprofit focused on regional collaboration and resilience. In reality, it increasingly functions as an unelected policy driver influencing TRPA land use policy, redevelopment priorities, tourist expansion, and density-based housekeeping strategies throughout the Tahoe Basin. TPC's own presentation repeatedly emphasized economic growth, entrepreneurship, redevelopment, and action and collaboration. But meanwhile, Tahoe still lacks a comprehensive basin-wide evacuation analysis, updated carrying capacity studies, independent cumulative environmental review, and transparent accounting of growth-inducing density incentives and conversions. To put it in layman's terms, TRPA has become more interested in economic issues than environmental issues, and TPC has been a driving force in pushing that agenda. I urge the Oversight Committee to take a look at the original mandate of TRPA and try and drive them back into that particular viewpoint. Thank you very much.
Ellie Waller, W-A-L-L-E-R. There is a common thread for the housing presentations: confusion on the growing list of terms used to identify what types of housing being addressed: workforce, affordable, achievable, the missing middle, and now Governor Lombardo, attainable. Example, attainable housing and affordable housing are terms often used interchangeably, but they cater to significantly different income levels and involve different strategies to address funding sources, housing needs, and price points. Until the various terms are understood, you have a difficult time supporting solutions. Average median income, AMI, is another issue that provides another layer of confusion. Is it countywide or just Tahoe? Retiree population versus working class averaging. Plans and extraordinary incentives, both in Nevada and California, are required to build units that are obtainable by whatever term is used. The St. Joseph's Community Land Trust somewhat outlines surplus state, county, or local lands, private donations, grants, partnerships, etc. are needed. The next issues is groups like the Prosperity Center, the Tahoe Housing Hub, the Mountain Housing Council, etc. Unelected bodies heavily rely upon external funding, regurgitate data from other sources, and reinvent themselves with many of the same people. They are conveners, connectors, coordinators by their admission. What are their real contributions to the units on the ground? Furthermore, black hole funds related to housing units being built. How many have been built with funds from mitigation fees, in lieu fees, developer land donation, etc.? Accountability is necessary. And lastly, why is TRPA engaged in housing issues? It's not a bi-state compact requirement. The 2012 regional plan update establishment of area plans, which supports the uniqueness of communities, differences in state laws, etc., is where housing should be addressed, not through TRPA code amendments. Thank you.
Brett Tibbetts, Tahoe East Shore Alliance. It is my opinion that the TRPA is failing rather largely at sustainable development, mostly because it has become far too lax in approving major projects and then not following through and monitoring them as they proceed. So we have ended up now for the past 10 years in a situation where developers or attempted developers get their development rights, but don't have the money to do the project and try to flip it and make money off of their approvals. Or they start the project and don't have the money, and we end up with a blighted site that is worse than when it began. I think this dates back to 2010 when Nevada was going to withdraw from the bi-state compact because the TRPA was far too rough or tough. Now, and it was, but it, as a result, has completely flipped to the other side where it's far too lax. Let's look at some of these projects. The granddaddy of them all, the South Lake Tahoe Convention Center site at Stateline, a massive, over a decade later, a massive cement hole with pylons and rebar still sitting out there and nothing happening. Latitude 39, an 8-story project at Stateline. The developer clearly didn't have the money, so they just tried to flip it. Luckily, they haven't touched the land. Waldorf Astoria to replace the Tahoe Biltmore. Totally ruined the site, made it far worse. It was a functioning, albeit old, casino and hotel. The TRPA allowed them to shut it down, and now it's a complete mess because the developer didn't have the money. 947 condos in Incline, on again, off again project, for sale, not for sale.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome to submit the rest of your comments in writing.
Laura Koski, Laura-Koski. We need quality control. We just had a mother and a 5-year-old hit by a DUI near Sierra at Tahoe on Memorial Day weekend. There was 150 incidences, criminal, stolen vehicles, as well as DUIs and drug-related issues. It looks like the basin needs to have some type of DUI check before they're even getting in their vehicle. Sure, we up the amount of police that are on the street, which is awesome. But my other concerns is Monsanto is they own glyphosate, they own Roundup, and they're the ones doing the reviews and saying, go ahead and spray along the Caldor area. And it's been documented that the brush isn't going to come back once you spray that. And so, you know, it's like these corporations are moving in on us, and I feel like you're allowing it. This board's just like allowing all this, and the community's uprising and outraged. I have a mayor now who's in trouble again with, you know, these incidences, and I need a law to remove them immediately. I have the Caldor, the sovereign declaration law that allows me to remove them, and to work with the law firm, but it takes too long. And I want to have them removed. I don't want to have the community so outraged. Like, where's this leadership leading us? It's an embarrassment. The expansion of the data centers, if 85% of the water is taken from Lake Tahoe to provide for Nevada, and they already have switch, and everybody's concerned of being surveillance in this data center in 15-minute cities and social credit system, then I want a moratorium, but I want this stopped. And most of the people in Nevada do. You talk to the ranchers and you talk to all the horse community, and they're outraged.
Thank you for your comments. You're welcome to submit the rest of your comments in writing. Thank you.
Elizabeth Learnhardt, Zephyr Cove. I don't have much to say except that affordable housing is probably one of the 2 buzzwords in this election cycle, besides data centers. But it is not a Tahoe-specific problem. It's a statewide and nationwide problem. I would really highly recommend this publication. It's a little dated. It's 4 years old. It's by the Nevada Policy Research Institute. It's very well researched. I will submit my comment to TRPA that I did 2 years ago. It hasn't changed. It has gotten just worse. Thanks to the Burton-Satini Act, we have increased the public lands in Tahoe, just like in Nevada, which is over 80%. If you have less affordable land, you have less affordable housing. Unless that changed, I don't see any rearrangement of the decks on the Titanic here in Tahoe to make it more affordable. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here? Thank you.
Hi, Ann Nichols, Nichols, North Lake Tahoe Preservation Alliance. Good morning, afternoon, I guess. The TRPA presentation on housing today leaves out one of the most important pieces of regional text. Over the last 5 years, the Reno-Washoe region has added roughly 25,000 units. It's twice the national per capita building rate for a metro of its size. As you probably noticed, it's amazing how many units are down there. That matters because Tahoe policy is being presented as though the basin itself must absorb additional housing growth without fully accounting for the substantial regional housing production already occurring outside the basin. The presentation also acknowledges that 1 in 2 jobs are filled by commuters, yet it does not provide cumulative VMT analysis, evacuation impacts, transportation funding, or regional commuter modeling. I'm sure driving over the Mount Rose Highway, you've noticed how much busier it is. It's just amazing. It's so full of cars and, you know, commuters. We need transit that goes from Reno and Carson to Tahoe. That's what we really need. People would prefer to live. We can supply some units. Maybe we can supply a couple hundred. Maybe they'd be done in 5 years, but we're not going to really make a dent. It's already been made in Reno. Also, the presentation by TRPA doesn't clearly explain how bonus units, conversions, and incentive programs actually affect build out and population. They only talk about units. They don't talk about how many people per unit. This is not an argument against housing. It's an argument for full regional analysis before additional density is approved in one of the most infrastructure constrained.
Thank you for your comments.
Fire vulnerable. Thank you.
You're welcome to submit the rest in writing. Thank you. Is there anybody else here that would like to give comments in person? I believe we have a couple callers online.
To provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 429, please press *6 to unmute. You may begin. Caller, you are unmuted on our end. Is your phone muted?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Elizabeth Baumann. I serve on the Tahoe Living Working Group, and I am the Director of Legal Assistance, Crisis Intervention, and Family Advocacy at Sierra Community House, which is based in Yukon Village and serves the North Lake Tahoe Truckee region. Our mission is to connect and empower our community through family strengthening, crisis intervention, hunger relief, and legal services. Over the past year, we've served more than 4,000 local households through one or more of our programs. As the cost of living has increased and economic conditions have become more challenging, we have seen a significant rise in community members seeking assistance, particularly help retaining stable housing. Every day, our team works with the cooks, teachers, construction workers, housekeepers, childcare providers, mechanics, food service workers, store clerk, and other community members who are the backbone of our local economy. We know that Tahoe's housing challenges affect people, families, and the long-term vitality of our communities. One resident I think of often in the years that I've worked with Sierra Community House was someone who worked for more than 30 years maintaining a local homeowners association. He was the kind of employee every community hopes to keep, reliable, skilled, and invested in the place where he lived and worked. When he was diagnosed with cancer, his employer valued him so much that they stepped in to help him cover his space rent at one of the area's mobile home parks where he had been a long-term homeowner, because they valued him and wanted him to remain part of the community. Today, many of those opportunities have disappeared as those kind of units have been redeveloped or converted to higher cost uses. The story reflects what we hear from many long-time residents who have contributed to this community for decades, but increasingly struggle to remain here. We need a range of housing solutions, from lower cost rentals.
Thank you for your comments. If you have additional comments, please submit them in writing. We have one more caller, I think.
Caller, you are unmuted. You may begin.
Hi, this is Peggy Meadows. I'm a longtime affordable housing advocate in California and in Nevada, and with St. Vincent de Paul. And the things I want to say, I've brought up before. Yes, we do need more effort to work with existing buildings like closed motels and vacant buildings like Incline Elementary School on Southwood Drive, and try to use those more. The motel that I'm thinking of is Tahoe Inn on Highway 28, and I want to make sure that the area of the renters that are in the 40 to 60% range on the income should be also a priority, not put aside for the higher percentages. So maybe a mix of 40 to 80% incomes be represented together. When they vote on that type of housing, please do not make it more than 3 stories and no zero foot lot lines. That's not good for the quality of life in those areas. And I was hoping that that this could be represented in what you look for in affordable housing. We definitely need it, and good luck to that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Chair, we have no additional callers.
Thank you. Thank you for all of you who are here today and have provided comments. I appreciate them and value the input. It's important that you're here, and I appreciate that you're here. Is that correct, Senator Scheibel?
Yes, it is. Thank you so much.
Welcome. And I believe that we have a birthday celebration to wish you a very happy birthday a couple days late. And we're sorry that you had travel challenges today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Our next agenda item is approval of the minutes for our February 27th meeting. Committee members, you all should have received meeting minutes in the mail. Are there any alterations that need to be made to the minutes? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes. We have a motion from Senator Titus and a second from Assemblyman DeLong. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
That motion passes. Thank you all. Our next agenda item is a presentation from the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency on affordable housing programs in the Lake Tahoe Basin. We're ready when you are. Will you introduce yourselves and be giving your presentation?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Daly, Chair Golding, Vice Chair Daly, and members of the committee. My name is Dan Segan, S-E-G-A-N. I am the Chief Science and Policy Officer here at TRPA, and I will be presenting today with Karen Fink, TRPA's Long Range Planning Director. I'd like to start with a brief history of regional planning and the Bi-State Compact that grounds us. The Bi-State Compact begins with a relatively simple finding and declaration. It reads, the waters of Lake Tahoe and other resources of the region are threatened with deterioration and degradation, which endangers the natural beauty and economic productivity of the region. That simple statement summarized what the two states wanted when they formed TRPA and what they expected the agency to do to protect Lake Tahoe. First slide, please. So the threat that the creators of TRPA were concerned about is summarized a little bit later in the Bi-State Compact. It was the increasing urbanization is threatening the ecological values of the region and threatening the public opportunities for use of these public lands. And if you look at the slide on the screen, you can see what they were seeing at the time. So we're talking about 1969. Just 20 years earlier, there were about 3,000 homes in our region. The Olympics of 1960 brought massive attention to the Tahoe region, and incredible growth followed. So what you're looking at on the screen is the pace of development, the number of homes being added in the region by decade in each year. So we added about 500 homes a year in the 1950s. In the 1960s, it had increased to about 1,000 homes a year. And in the 1970s, it was up to 1,600 homes a year. So if the pace of development had continued, there would be 110,000 homes in Lake Tahoe today. For context, Reno has 115,000 homes today. Carson City, just over 27,000 homes. So you'd be looking at a region roughly the size of Reno. Next slide, please. But as you all know, that pace of development did not continue. And that's thanks to the two states coming together and supporting the 1987 regional plan, which did some major things. First of all, it created the modern development cap that the region currently operates under. It limited the total number of new homes, hotel units, commercial floor area, and recreation opportunities in the region. It prevented any new subdivisions and ensured that any future development would be consistent with the environmental goals that we established for our agency. Next slide, please. And you can see the impact of that regional plan almost immediately. So if you're a student of history, you know that the agency was created in 1969, but its mere presence did not curb the rate of development that we were seeing. It took that 1987 regional plan and everyone coming together and agreeing on how growth would proceed within the region to curb that rapid rate of development. And as you can see, we've continued at this relative low rate of development ever since. Next slide, please. So as you know, we've gone through a couple of updates to our regional plan. The last major update was in 2012. And so this is the 87 regional plan. This update is occurring in about 2010. And the course of the region's history has dramatically changed at that time. No longer is the region experiencing rapid growth. We are now in the midst of the Great Recession and the rise of gaming in Northern California. And the impact on our region has been immense. So the two lines that you see on the screen, the top line is the population, and the second is the job numbers. In terms of population, the region dropped from 62,000 people, its population peak, in 2000, to just about 55,000 people in 2010. It had 32,000 jobs in 2000, and it had about 24,000 10 years later. If you're trying to put that in context in your minds, the job loss experienced within the region is roughly on par with what happened in Detroit in terms of job losses. What that meant overall is that the region had lost 1 in 4 jobs, 1 in 5 working families, and 1 in 10 people that lived here from 10 years earlier. It's summarized fairly bluntly in the popular press there. The region was facing a decision: change or die. UNLV's gaming research summed up in a less dramatic way, but no less alarming way. At the time, they wrote, "One finding that emerges from the trend analysis is that in real terms, the size of the gaming industry of South Lake Tahoe has contracted by 2/3 since 1990. So these concerns were so overwhelming that the two states came together along with the federal government and amended the bi-state compact to recognize these concerns explicitly. And so when we look at updating the regional plan in 2010, we're actually facing this broader landscape, not of a development out of control, but of a region largely in decline. Next slide, please. And while a region in decline may be a broad concern anywhere, it's doubly as concerning in Lake Tahoe, because more than 80% of Tahoe's development occurred prior to that first regional plan. And there was ongoing environmental degradation because of that development, because the development was put in the wrong place. It was put in our wetlands. It occurred without appropriate stormwater control. So without reinvestment and redevelopment from the private sector, we threatened to not have the environmental benefits that go along with that and continued environmental degradation within our region. And so the 2012 regional plan update focused on 2 major things. It focused on greater incentives for environmental redevelopment, and it also acknowledged that a top-down planning approach may not be the best one for the region, that we needed more involvement from our local jurisdictions who are closer to the situation. And so the plan set broad guidelines for what we would like to see in terms of environmental protection and redevelopment, and then allowed each of the local jurisdictions to adopt their own rules to best achieve those outcomes. Next slide, please. So has that worked? So we're 14 years on now, and we have made substantial progress on the environmental front. You're probably all aware we halted the 3-decade-long decline in the lake's clarity. We've collectively restored more than 1,100 acres of streams and wetlands. We've built 215 miles of bike paths around the region and retrofitted more than 845 miles of roadways with better stormwater controls. We can also measure the impact of the regional plan in how it incentivizes and influences the development within our region. And we look at two key things when we look at that. Where is new development directed? And is the regional plan incentivizing the removal of that legacy development within the region? And we see on both fronts that it's succeeding. All of the new development is occurring in suitable areas, not in the most sensitive parts of our region. And we've seen progress towards the removal of legacy development. Since the regional plan update, we've removed 63 residential units from sensitive areas and more than 109 hotel units from those sensitive areas. Collectively, the private sector has invested more than $450 million in environmentally beneficial projects in the region, including nearly $70 million in best management practices that reduce fine sediments from going into our lake that affect lake clarity. They've invested heavily in undergrounding utilities lines to improve scenic view sheds and improve the resiliency of our community to wildfires. They've run mass micro transit within our region and commuter shuttles to get people in and out of our region, both of which reduce VMT, another threat to our lake. They've invested in aquatic invasive species control projects, both in the marinas as well as purchasing cleaning stations for non-motorized recreation within our region. Next slide, please. And we've seen also the beneficial side of that in terms of our demographic trends. So the trends in the 2000 census were less alarming than the 2010 census. We've seen a region that's largely stabilized its population and stabilized the total number of jobs. Next slide, please. But everything is not well when you look underneath the surface. So what we've also seen within that census is an aging population and demographic shifts within our region. So the bottom of the graph you're looking at is age cohorts within our region and the change in those in absolute population in the last 20 years. And what you will see in those orange lines, those are where our population has declined. And the population of the Tahoe region has declined in every age cohort under age 50 in the last 20 years. That has partially been offset by growth in the older age cohorts. And you can see all of the older age cohorts within our region have grown over that period. And what you see as you have a population shifting away from a working age population to a non-working age population is an impact jobs within our region is held by commuters, people traveling long distances into our region to work. Next slide, please. And so why are families commuting farther to work in our region? And one of the commenters noted that the housing crisis and the explosion in the price of housing is not just a Tahoe problem, and it is not. The graph on the screen, you can see both California and Nevada. We could have added housing prices nationwide here. But we've seen an explosion in the price of housing within our region. The gray line is Tahoe, even just in the last 8 years. And that median price is rising and rising, making it harder and harder for people to afford to live and work in our region. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen Fink to provide more detail on what we are doing.
Thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, Assembly and Senate members. My name is Karen Fink, Karenfink. I'm the Long Range Planning Director for TRPA. Tahoe Living is the name of the strategic priority that TRPA is working on that's focused on housing, and it includes planned updates to the regional plan. So the focus is on improving access to housing for local families, seniors, and working households, so that ensuring that teachers, nurses, firefighters, and our essential workers can live in Tahoe close to where they work. Building on the success and the vision of the 2012 regional plan that Dan was talking about, what we're considering now is how can we take this current problem, inadequate housing for our workforce, and address both the environmental and community issues related to that at the same time. So as part of this, one of the key issues that we're trying to tackle is how do we ensure that as much of our remaining growth under our growth management system comes in as workforce size housing, some of that housing that we used to see in our towns and communities, but that we don't always see as much anymore, often because our zoning codes don't allow it, or because over time codes have started to disincentivize that type of housing. So that's what we're looking at in this Tahoe Living strategic priority. Our first Tahoe Living amendments in 2021 removed TRPA's prohibition on accessory dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units, you may be familiar, are also known as mother-in-law units or backyard cottages, and we call them ADUs for short. So once we remove that prohibition, local jurisdictions could then adopt ADU codes that were appropriate for their regions within Lake Tahoe. And then at the same time, we also removed some barriers to converting and redeveloping older hotels into residential development. Then in 2023, the governing board approved the next set of Tahoe Living amendments, and this was focused entirely on incentivizing deed-restricted, affordable, and workforce housing in town centers and in multifamily zones. And so that, again, was supporting compact, walkable development close to transit and infrastructure, and also supporting that redevelopment of aging and blighted properties, either into affordable housing or mixed use development with an affordable housing component. So actually, I'm not ready to depart that slide. Thank you. So you are going to hear more in the upcoming presentations from local housing partners during this meeting, but I also wanted to highlight that TRPA does work closely with our local jurisdictions to support the range of innovative housing solutions that they're working on. And some of those things include things like supporting movable tiny homes or prefab construction. And those types of things dovetail very nicely with these codes that we've been working on. And we're already seeing local jurisdictions take advantage of these codes. For instance, recently, Washoe County updated their area plan to allow accessory dwelling units, but they tailored those codes to their region and they restricted them from being used as short-term rentals. So next slide, please. Thank you. In the current phase of Tahoe Living that we're working on right now, we took to heart two key pieces of feedback that we heard during those two initial phases that kept coming up. We were hearing from our working group that two key policies of TRPA's regional plan, our coverage policies and our system of trading development rights, were disproportionately impacting smaller homes or smaller housing types. So as an example of what I mean, Dan was talking about our growth management system. The way that system works is anytime anyone wants to build a housing unit, regardless of size, they need to obtain a development right. And that's how we track where we are with respect to our overall growth management system. And those development rights are tradable commodities. They can be obtained on the open market. So acquiring a development right for a small ADU can make up to 30% of the cost of construction of that unit, whereas obtaining that development right for a larger home that we often see that's tailored to the second home market, that only costs about 5% of construction. So you can see that there's an incentive for people to build larger homes. They get a greater return on investment, and this development rate, is a smaller proportion of the overall cost. So with this current phase of work that we're now in, we're looking at how to address this type of disparity and other disparities like that. So what we're looking at is, what is the win-win here? Like, can we update our regulations to both resolve this problem and also, so making it easier to build those smaller units, but also updating, achieving greater environmental gain, because those units will have a smaller environmental footprint. And as I mentioned before, they'll be closer to things like transit, stormwater treatment, and other infrastructure. So what we're looking at with this phase, which it has a name, I actually, apologies that I didn't include it on this slide. We're purposely calling this phase the Cultivating Community, Conserving the Basin project, because that's what we're trying to do with this project. So based on input from the public and our advisory groups, we've identified 3 main policy categories that we're focusing on with this effort. So number 1 is reducing the time and cost to permit and construct these smaller units. The second is protect water quality through these efforts. And then the third is increase housing choice. So escaping from this trend we're seeing of larger and larger homes and providing a range of housing types for our local workers. And our governing board did advance these policies into the environmental analysis phase. So everything I've described on the previous slides was developed through intensive community outreach. A key focus of this phase has been to really bring the groups most directly impacted by the housing crisis into our advisory bodies. And so we do have 2 key groups that we work with. One is the community partner group, and that's made up of social service agencies and people that are working directly with those that are most vulnerable to the housing crisis. And then we also have the Tahoe Living Working Group, which is comprised of those with expertise in housing or those that are affected by housing. So we have also environmental groups on that working group. We have local jurisdictions are represented, also affordable housing developers, and many others. And many of them are either going to be presenting here later today or are listening in on the call. So through these groups, we've had 3 rounds of public outreach. We've had workshops on the North Shore and the South Shore. We've convened over 20 one-on-one meetings with stakeholders. And overall, we've engaged around 3,000 people and about 600 people in Spanish. And so what we've heard through those conversations, this slide just shows a highlight of what we've heard. So we definitely heard, make it easy to build the housing that we want, that achieves our community and environmental goals. We heard that deed restrictions should be as simple as possible. We likely do need to place some sort of deed restriction on much of the new housing that we're trying to incentivize, because otherwise it will erode into the second home market. But it doesn't take a lot to keep those homes out of the second home market. There's a lot of support for missing middle. Those are things like accessory dwelling units and small apartments like duplexes and fourplexes. We definitely heard that there is a need for deed restricted housing for the lowest income levels. There was confirmation that TRPA should maintain our growth limits and our growth management system that Dan was talking about, and acknowledgement that coverage is a disproportionate cost on small housing types, and that's a priority to look at that system. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously, we are now in the environmental analysis phase of cultivating community, conserving the basin, and we're doing a full environmental impact statement with 3 alternatives, and that will analyze the impacts and benefits of the proposed policies with respect to TRPA's environmental thresholds and other standards. And one of the key aspects of this study is coordinating with public safety agencies. Part of the environmental analysis includes an alternatives analysis. So we'll be analyzing a no project alternative, and that's where we would be relying on the commuting patterns that we have today to get workers into the basin. The second alternative is called housing forward, and that's where we are looking at the policies that I described in the previous slide. That would be encouraging infill development and redevelopment to provide housing while continuing to achieve our environmental goals. And then a housing preservation alternative, which would utilize existing housing stock as much as possible. So those will be the three alternatives that we'll analyze. I talked a little bit about the timing already, but we're in the final quadrant of this project where we're in the analysis phase. And then after that, we'll be bringing forward final policies for consideration for approval. And we expect a draft environmental impact statement for a 60-day public review in October of this year. So that wraps up my presentation. I just wanted to close with a quote from a resident of the new Sugar Pine Village Affordable Housing Project. This picture is from the ribbon cutting from that event. The Sugar Pine Village has over 120 units now operating of what will eventually be a 248 unit affordable housing project. And at the ribbon cutting for phase 1, we had, local electeds there, developers, state officials, other agencies, but there were also residents who were already living in the units. And we just heard so many stories from them about how appreciative they were of these new units, that many of them had been living in their cars or had been forced to move frequently as their rents went up or their homes were sold. And one resident, Wendy in the orange sweatshirt, she talked about how this housing has relieved so much stress from her life because of the more affordable rent that's actually been improving her health. So we just wanted to highlight that one of the really important things of all of this work is improving quality of life for our residents and workers. So thank you very much for your time. I will now turn it back over to Chair Goulding for any committee questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Committee members?
Thank you, Chair. My question's for Ms. Fink. Did I hear you correctly that it was Washoe County that banned the accessory dwelling units from being considered VHRs or STRs?
Yes, that's correct. And in California, state law prevents them from being short-term rentals, but I believe not in Nevada. So Washoe County took that step to do that.
But Douglas County does allow it, and I just pulled up Douglas County code and I was going through it quickly.
Douglas County has not changed their area plans to allow accessory dwelling units in the Tahoe Basin. They are allowed on parcels greater than 1 acre, but now TRPA changed their code to allow them on parcels less than 1 acre. But Douglas County has not made that change yet.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Any other members? Questions? Okay, I think that's it. You did an excellent job. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That closes this agenda item. Our next presentation is also by TRPA on mitigation fees. Ms. Reagan, welcome back, and begin when you are ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Goulding and Vice Chair Daly, committee members, the staff, and the public. I'm Julie Reagan, last name spelled R-E-G-A-N, TRPA's Executive Director for the record, and I am joined by Tracy Campbell, who you'll be hearing from in just a moment. As you've heard at each meeting of this interim, and welcome back to our office, by the way, our mission is to harmonize the health of Tahoe's natural environment and the vitality of our region's communities. And one of the ways that we achieve this challenging balance is through our Mitigation Fund program. TRPA established a Mitigation Fund program in 1992 to fund environmental projects and reduce the negative impacts of development. Mitigation fees paid by the private sector go directly to projects that benefit the community and help protect Lake Tahoe's environment. The Mitigation Mitigation Fund program allows for vital redevelopment while benefiting the environment as much as possible. Development projects' impact on the environment can vary depending on the size, location, and type of project. Likewise, the corresponding mitigation fees also differ, with larger developments paying more. While TRPA collects the fees, we hold these funds in trust for local jurisdictions to use for projects. Mitigation fees collected do not fund our agency's general fund, operations, or staff. The fees are grouped into three broad categories: water quality, mobility mitigation, and excess land coverage. And you've heard the land coverage term in our last presentations, and so indulge me for 30 seconds to give you the TRPA 101 land coverage basics. Water quality, including our famed lake clarity, can be impacted when land is covered by pavement or other what's called non-permeable materials, such as decking, roofing, asphalt. In Tahoe, this is known as land coverage, as it indicates any covered area where snow and rain can't soak and infiltrate into the ground. If not properly managed, coverage can cause stormwater runoff into the lake without being filtered, carrying fine sediment and pollutants. Essentially, what happens on the land affects the lake. When a property owner wants to add land coverage, water quality mitigation fees are collected to fund projects that will improve water quality elsewhere, such as creek restorations and erosion control projects. When new residential or commercial units are built, the increased traffic can impact congestion, namely vehicle miles traveled is the issue. Mobility mitigation fees are directed to projects that help reduce traffic by providing alternative options for transportation, such as transit, bike, and pedestrian paths. Excess land coverage mitigation fees apply when a property wants to develop a lot where land coverage on a property already exceeds what's allowable. These fees are transferred to state conservation areas, namely on the Nevada side, Nevada Division of State Lands, to purchase land that can be made public and protected from development. State and federal agencies have acquired more than 9,000 parcels in the Tahoe Basin that otherwise may have been developed, and many of them on sensitive and fragile lands. These small, publicly owned lots are maintained as open space in local neighborhoods, providing greater quality of life, wildlife passage, and water quality benefits. So just with that brief introduction, I will now turn the presentation over to Tracy Campbell to dive into the specific details about the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Campbell, Tracy-Campbell, and I work in the Environmental Improvement Program Department here at TRPA. And one of my responsibilities there is the administration of this Mitigation Fund program. So it is my pleasure to just be able to be here and provide a brief overview of that program. We'll walk through just briefly the intent of the program, the different fund categories Julie alluded to, the types of project they support. We'll take a real high-level look at the numbers, and then we'll close with the most interesting part, which is highlighting some of those projects where mitigation funds have been implemented on the ground. It's 10 minutes or less, probably less because I'm nervous and I'm talking too quickly. I'll try and slow down a bit. So as Julie mentioned, the purpose of the Mitigation Fund program is to offset the environmental impacts of development in the Tahoe region. And to draw a wider frame around that, the mitigation program is a key element of the regional plan. The regional plan uses a combination of conservation programs, environmental regulation, development limitation, and restoration investment to protect Lake Tahoe and achieve regional environmental goals. All of those elements work together, and the mitigation program helps connect development activity with environmental improvement. So, depending on the type, size, and impact of a project, applicants may be required to pay mitigation fees. Those fees are then directed towards projects that reduce, offset, or mitigate their environmental impacts. So this visual just shows the flow of mitigation funds within the program. The process starts with a project applicant and a project, obviously. As part of the approval process, applicants may be required to pay mitigation fees, and TRPA then allocates those fees into the appropriate accounts, where the funds are, again, as Julie mentioned, they're held in trust for local jurisdictions or the state land bank. When local jurisdictions or the land banks have eligible projects, they can then submit to TRPA with a request for funding. And then we bring those requests before the governing board for review. And if approved, the funds are then dispersed for environmental improvement program or transportation projects. So this slide just illustrates the types and the uses of the funds. Most mitigation funds are intended just to support shovel-ready projects that are either identified on the EIP, Environmental Improvement Programme 5-year list, or their regional transportation plan. The fees are then divided into several funding categories. Each one is tied to a specific type of environmental impact. Water quality funds support erosion control and water quality improvement projects. Stream Environment Zone, or SEZ funds, as you often hear them called, they're a subset of the water quality funds, and it's a 25% set aside specifically for stream and meadow restoration projects. Mobility mitigation supports transportation and mobility improvements. The operations and maintenance funds help our jurisdictions maintain and monitor EIP projects at 25% set aside again from both the water quality and the mobility funds. And then finally, excess coverage. Those funds, as Julie mentioned, are used to acquire and retire sensitive land coverage. So I mentioned most of the mitigation funds are restricted to implementation, shovel-ready projects, and that's because the intent of those funds is to move quickly into environmental benefit on the ground. But there is one exception, and that's the interest earned on those accounts. Those interest dollars are way more flexible, and so they can be used earlier in the project life cycle for things like planning and design. And that flexibility, we often hear this from our jurisdictions, is really valuable to them because those early project phases are often the hardest to fund. So the interest funds can help jurisdictions get a project moving, they can close critical funding gaps, and they also can be used as match, so they can position projects to leverage much larger state and federal funding. So what does it look like at the project level? So that will vary depending on the type and the scale of a project, but these examples just illustrate what a typical applicant might pay. So on the left is a relatively simple home addition, adding approximately 550 square feet of coverage. In fact, the majority of our applications are this type of modification. And for a project like this, the only mitigation fee that applies is the water quality fee, which in this example is just over $1,000. And then on the right is a new single family dwelling. So the project obviously creates substantially more land coverage, and it also adds a new residential unit of use, which creates additional vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. So because of those additional impacts, this project generates both water quality and mobility mitigation fees. Water quality is approximately $3,500, the mobility fee is just over $7,000. So while there's no such thing as a typical cost, because the fees will vary depending on the project, these examples just give you a general idea of how the fees are calculated and how they contribute to the broader mitigation program. So briefly, the numbers, this chart just shows the cumulative fee contribution and distributions broken down by fund. So over the last 5 fiscal years, we've collected just over $15.5 million in fees, and just over $15 million has been dispersed. So you can see the contributions do fluctuate year by year, depending on development activity, and then disbursements will also vary just depending on the readiness of EIP projects. So while in any given year, those contributions and expenditures don't line up perfectly, over the longer period, that balance evens out. Okay, I promised it was going to get a bit more interesting. So we'll just close with highlighting a few projects. These images show Douglas County's Kale Drive Complete Street project. As many of us know, that area is in a highly degraded state. This project will transform Kale Drive by improving drainage, adding sidewalks, bike lanes, and crosswalks. It will also improve safety at the intersection and underground those overhead utilities. Also in Douglas County, these images are before and after conditions for the Brotovich Park Stream Environment Zone and Park Rehabilitation Project, where water quality and SEZ dollars helped complete a funding package of nearly $500,000. The project relocated the baseball field and playground to less sensitive areas and also upgraded parking and water quality infrastructure. So on the right there, you can see some of that hard coverage for parking, but what you also see is the infrastructure in front for channeling and infiltration. As part of the site reconfiguration, the project improved stormwater treatment and erosion control to bring that parcel into BMP compliance. And so moving over to Washoe County, these images are before, during, and after conditions. This is phase 2 of the Lowerwood Creek Water Quality Improvement Project. This project installed stormwater infrastructure, treatment BMPs, and shoulder stabilization to reduce erosion and improve water quality discharging to Lake Tahoe. Most recently, these are before pictures, so I apologize, they're not very pretty. Most recently in Washoe, at last month's governing board meeting, the board approved funding requests for the Burnt Cedar Beach Lakeshore Boulevard Water Quality Improvement Project. that will install treatment BMPs and shoulder stabilization within a priority treatment area. Also in April, the Governing Board approved funding for the Lower Rosewood Fish Passage project, which will replace older culvert crossings with fish-friendly structures and improve the floodplain connectivity in that area. And then just this week, on Wednesday, the Governing Board approved over $200,000 in funding for both the Upper Third and Rosewood Creek's water quality improvement project. So just to wrap up with a few key takeaways, the Mitigation Fund program is a really important part of making sure that as development occurs in the basin, there's also investment back into the environmental protection and restoration. These funds are especially valuable. As I mentioned, they rarely stand alone. In many cases, they provide the local match needed to secure much larger federal and state grants. So often a relatively modest mitigation investment can unlock much larger funding opportunities and help move major projects forward. Overall, the program delivers environmental and community benefit. Mitigation fees are being collected, invested into shovel-ready projects, and then translated into real environmental benefit on the ground throughout the basin. And I will pass it back to Julie. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate it. Over the last decade, TRPA has directed more than $25 million to local jurisdictions for projects similar to, as Tracy described, that improve the community and benefit Lake Tahoe. Projects like bike and pedestrian paths, transit and bus shelters, street sweepers, stormwater treatment, stream restoration, and so much more. And for many of our environmental improvement program projects, the contribution of mitigation funds are indispensable. Many of the beloved projects that we have come to appreciate here in the basin would not have been possible without this public-private partnership. With that, we will wrap and thank you for your attention. We'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the presentation, and I just need some clarification. Your authority to charge these mitigation funds comes from NRS in Nevada or the compact? And I'm sorry if I missed that and you had already said that.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I'm happy to jump in, and my teammates may want to add. Julie Reagan, for the record, TRPA's Executive Director. Our authority is from the compact, and as you know from other matters relating to mitigation fees, it has to be a commensurate nexus between the impact and the fee. And the question of the amount of fees is also a topic. And so these projects are very expensive. One of the things I wanted to note to connect back to the last presentation, our housing environmental impact statement is also going to have a companion study on fees. We've not updated some of these fees in some years, and we're looking at the cost of these projects to make sure that we are keeping pace with those fees, recognizing there must be a proportional nexus so that we are not arbitrarily overcharging projects for more than their fair share. So it's a fine balance, but the authority essentially rests in the compact. We don't have taxing authority the same way, a local jurisdiction would, or, going out to the voters, but the mitigation fees are directly linked to impacts, and they have been established through our regional plan.
A follow-up, if I might. So along that same line, jurisdictions also charge impact fees. And in my mind, the impact, say, that the county might go, are used for schools and true impacts. Yes, environmental impacts is what the mitigation things, but you talk about mitigation and impacts, but in my mind, impact fees are separate from that. Like they go to building schools, they go to building roads, they go to fire and police and some of those supports. Where do those funds come from? Is that the local jurisdictions around this then that do off, when a development comes in, they charge impact fees? Because the lines are blurred, I think.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director, and I may call in Devin Middlebrook, who has some local government experience to add, but you are correct. They are separate. These are mitigation fees, and these are directly attributable to impacts to the environment. We don't charge impact fees. We're not a local jurisdiction. Most of our local jurisdictions within the Tahoe Basin portion aren't charging many fees because we are not doing subdivisions, as you heard in the last presentation. Most of those impact fees are in local jurisdictions in, 2,000 acre parcels that are subdivided, and that there is an impact associated with that goes to police, fire, schools. That's not within our purview. So they are separate. And the 3 fees that Tracy so well presented are related to environmental impacts. Anything to add? No, thank you.
Assemblymember Watts?
Thank you. That was really helpful information. I know down in Clark County, we have the multi-species habitat conservation plan, which is another example of environmental impacts and mitigation funding. And that is, that is a specific type of impact with a specific kind of assessment, and that is separate and in addition to the impact of new development on the need for emergency services, roads, parks, et cetera. And so I think, the key thing is just making sure that each one of those is clearly defined and laid out. And I think your response shows how that's parceled out both between TRPA and local governments and also based on the specific impact that's being looked at. The question that I had is on need. So can you just talk a little bit, in that presentation, you showed, on average, essentially what's coming in equals what's going out. I was just wondering, is that meeting the need or, essentially are there additional projects that could use some of this funding? Also understanding that there's federal and other funding streams that can get braided in, but are these assessments not only accurately reflecting kind of the impact, but are they also reflecting the need for restoration, mitigation, and other measures? Or is there a need beyond what's coming in revenue right now?
Chair, I'd be happy to start, and my colleagues may want to join. Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Watts. This is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. There absolutely is additional need for projects. There's no question. We in Lake Tahoe are probably more fortunate than a lot of other special areas in the country. Since 1997, the birth of our environmental improvement program, we have amassed a restoration program of $3 billion. 3 billion with a B. And that is from federal partners, that is from the state of Nevada's bonds, that is from California's bonds, that is from 6 local jurisdictions and the private sector. Those funds have flowed through federal agencies, largely the U.S. Forest Service. We often help deploy those funds to make sure they are getting on the ground to very high priority projects in the advancement of our thresholds. So the environmental standards that you heard previously, all of these projects have a direct contribution to achieving and maintain our thresholds as the compact directs us to do. I will say we're doing pretty well on the mitigation funds in terms of how they've been allocated. And back to the earlier question about the local jurisdictions, I mean, these funds are going back into the city, the counties, and they're benefiting the local jurisdictions from where those fees were collected from. And so we can always use more. We are taking a look at 2 of those 3 funds to make sure that we are properly capturing the impacts. And we're doing that as part of the fee study with the housing work and analyzing our there are hundreds of projects in the queue for the environmental improvement program. We have that $3 billion has funded over 900 projects in the last 30 years, but we have several hundreds more. So we're doing that analysis of looking forward over the next 10 years of what the price tag may be for those projects, looking at federal sources, state sources, local and private sector contributions, and then where are we short? And so we're doing part of that analysis now, but there may be anything to add, no. Tracy or Devin? Okay, I hope that answers your question, Assemblymember.
Yes, that's very helpful. And that's what I was hoping, is that there's just that ongoing work of, reassessing and making sure that it takes into consideration, that figure is fair in terms of the impacts, but is also being considered in terms of the price tag of the projects, and that there's an effort to continually kind of reevaluate and balance that. And it sounds like that's a process that's ongoing. So thank you very much for the response, and thank you for the question, Chair.
Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation. I wanted to dig a little bit into kind of the fees itself, not necessarily the price per acre or price per VMT, but more on some of the underlying assumptions for the water quality fee and the land disturbance. It's obviously by square foot. That seems to be very clear cut. But a VMT, establishment of what are the number of VMTs that you apply to a project, there are obviously a number of assumptions that go into that. Who develops those assumptions and who approves those assumptions?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember DeLong. This is Julie Reagan, TRP's Executive Director. So the vehicle miles traveled, fees that would be collected to benefit those projects, that's the Mobility Mitigation Fund. And the fees were recalculated as part of the update of our threshold standard, which was a new standard to reduce overall trips in the VMT as part of the Transportation and Sustainable Communities standard that we just adopted within recent years. And so we did take a fresh look at that. It used to be just called the Air Quality Mitigation Fee. And so we actually still have a fund balance that we're giving out to local jurisdictions with those fees collected. The trips are calculated by the trip manual that all the local jurisdictions use that are very standard for, a local family residential unit has a very specific trips that the traffic engineers associate with, and we use those. And then we have our transportation planners work with our project planners here at the agency on larger projects. It's pretty straightforward for residential units, and that's most of the development that we have. About 100 houses a year are built, just to kind of, again, connect back. Think of all the homes, up to 1,600 homes were built maybe in the 70s. We're building in the basin, that's Nevada, California, north, south, only about 100 homes a year. Very straightforward in terms of how those trips are calculated. It's more complicated when you get into commercial projects or larger projects, like some of the redevelopment projects that are coming down the line. And so we have traffic analysis, there are engineers involved, and then we work through that as part of the project review and then assess whether there's a certain number of trips. If it goes above a certain threshold, there are additional mitigations required. And the idea of having, we call it a screening level, and there's a certain number of trips associated with each project. The idea is that if a project goes over that, the incentive financially is for that project to do more, to pay for more shuttles, to get more van employee shuttles as part of like workforce housing. There are measures that they can take, which is the incentive process. And so that's happy to give you a couple examples to follow up and to get you more details if that's helpful.
Thank you. Didn't quite answer my question, so let me restate it. And that is, for the large commercial developments, that seems a little more complicated than the single residence. You said you do traffic analysis, et cetera. So are you then approving that number that comes up for the establishment of the number of VMTs? Do you approve that, or does the board approve that?
The TRPA staff, if it's a staff level permit, that is going through the staff level. If it's a large project, like a big redevelopment project associated with an environmental impact statement, the governing board. Any project that's large enough to require an environmental impact statement has to go before our governing board, and then they are making the final decision. And the traffic analysis and the level of VMT is a part of that project. So it would be either a staff or a board decision.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So couple of things, and I know we went over some of this stuff last interim with the letter on the matrix that we wanted you guys to look at. And I think that you guys are working on that, I think, looking at the various things. So in line with a couple of the other questions that we've had, is there a process or a way, I think you alluded to it, is that you can, and I've seen it in other jurisdictions, City of Reno, different places where they'll waive certain fees, or they'll say, hey, this is the type of development we want to encourage. This is the housing that's going to reduce vehicle miles traveled, so we can waive or mitigate mitigation, not the right word. You can lower some of those fees to help the development pencil out. Is that in part of your projects as well?
Chair, thank you for the question, Senator Daly. This is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. A couple of things. There are also filing permit fees, not to be confused with impact or mitigation fees. I will tell you, TRPA, as a policy matter, our board directed us to waive application fees for affordable housing projects. I believe we're the only entity in the basin that's doing that. Local jurisdictions are still charging for, application fees. So our board has directed us to waive those, just to one more barrier to remove to get an affordable project. And then our environmental impact statement that is accompanying the work that Karen Fink just relayed to you is looking at an analysis of waiving mitigation fees. Many jurisdictions in the country have waived mitigation fees, even if it's for a few years, to incentivize more affordable projects. Now, with what Ms. Campbell just laid out to you, there is a cost to that because these dollars are funding actual projects that local jurisdictions have counted on to make possible the work that you just heard about. So we want to take that into account as part of our environmental review, and we are looking at as part of the fee study and the analysis.
Understood. I just, in a lot of areas and ways, you want to try to incentivize certain developments over others. Not that you're picking winners and losers, but you do need to not have 1 out of 2 people being commuting from out of the area, which has its own set of problems and issues and traffic and air, water quality, all the rest of it, and just the vehicle miles traveled, et cetera. So I think there's a nexus there to do some of that. Also on the bigger projects, I hope you're reviewing that because I think sometimes they have a greater impact, maybe not so much on the environmental side, but more on are they doing anything to improve the quality of the lake? And that's where some of the matrix questions come in. And then just to follow up a little bit on the traffic or the vehicles miles traveled study, you guys have a baseline that you say, hey, these are the thresholds that we've looked at and your type of project fits into this level and here you go. I suppose, and I don't think it would be prohibited, if there was a big development that said, hey, no, I disagree with that, they could spend the $150,000 to do their own traffic analysis and submit it to you for your evaluation. But a lot of times, if you've done that work already, doing one on their own is just going to add cost to their project, in my view. So I think it's a service almost that if they don't like it, they can do their own, but it's going to cost them money. Is that correct?
Senator Daly, thank you for the question. This is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. Actually, most of the big projects are doing their own analysis, and that's required as part of their submittal because these are complicated analyses and they're hiring engineers. And then depending on the project, the event center just down the street, we've talked about that. There were also independent traffic engineers that were brought into that project. So in that case, there was an analysis, then there were additional experts, and that is a decision that varies project by project. But some of these bigger projects get really complex, and so it varies.
How did the findings line up?
They were pretty close. Dan Segan is the expert. He'll correct me if I got that wrong, but yeah, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, no, I just was trying to give an example.
Yes. And Senator, if I may, just to finish answering your question, also Julie Reagan here at TRPA. The other way to incentive projects in the affordable range and smaller units, I want to underscore what Ms. Fink said earlier. There are the fees aspect of it, but there's also the process improvements. And one of the things we're taking a very hard look at as part of the housing work is how can we streamline processes that make it more efficient for smaller projects to get through the permitting process easier, because we recognize that with a regional overlay of the agency here, we also have local jurisdiction coordination. There are also utility hookups to the questions earlier. We're working with the public utility districts and all the other fees that go into the project as a whole. And so we're looking at holistically, not just at what we're doing, but also coordinating with our partners to see how we can streamline the process to make it easier for people who want to build smaller units to get through the process.
Yes, but can you hang on just a minute, Senator? Because I want to follow up on Assemblymember Stallong's question. And what I'm hearing is a concern about transparency in that evaluation. And I'm wondering if there's, on these big complex projects, you've done a really good job of answering, you know, there's multiple inputs, people can pay for their own assessments, but a $7,000 fee on a single family home seems like a fairly significant fee on a single family home. Is there an appeals process, and what kind of transparency? Because I didn't hear the question that I think the Assemblyman was asking was, what is actually the methodology? What's the methodology in getting to that into that number? So is there a transparency on the methodology, and is there an appeal process?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. This is Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. These fees have been around for so many decades. There's a fairly good understanding of the water quality, how it's calculated. There is transparency around that, and we can send you like links to our website. Everything that we're doing is online through the parcel tracker, laketahoeinfo.org. We actually just had an incredible briefing with our governing board this week on some advancements to add more transparency so that people can pull these things up themselves for anywhere. And then, is there an appeal? That is a question I will have to ask. I mean, in general, projects can be appealed. Whether the fees can be appealed, I haven't run across that in my experience here, but I can let you know. They're pretty well established. The mobility mitigation fee is a newer changed fee from how the air quality mitigation fee was collected historically. That is fairly new, and so we've done a lot of education with big projects. We're still working through a lot of those implementation details, but happy to get you some more information to follow up.
Thank you. It's the transparency aspect of that I think that is important to the public. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I think I have more questions than I have that you've given answers to. Early on today and under public comment, there was a lot of concerns about projects that have been approved, but then for whatever reason, they don't go anywhere. And now they're a little bit of a blight. I'm wondering, you talk about mitigation fees, we've talked about impact fees that jurisdictions can put in. Certainly in Nevada, in our mining applications, there's a reclamation bonds that these mines have to put forward so that no longer can they have something like Anaconda in my front yard, literally in my front yard. I wonder, what happens here? You have mitigation fees, you have impact fees. Is there any reclamation bonding so a project that you've approved, do you collect the mitigation fees up front? And then can these fees be used then to take that eyesore, they disturbed the ground, now it's worse than it was before they ever started? Can these fees be used for projects like that?
Thanks for the question. I'll do my best to get to all those moving parts. This is Julie Reagan, Julie Reagan, Executive Director of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. So the communication around these fees is critical. And so I want to make sure that we answer your questions thoroughly. We partner with local jurisdictions on performance bonds. It just depends. Our mitigation fees and the security deposits that we collect can be sometimes in the form of a bond for a large project. They are really designed to remediate the impact of the water quality and the stormwater erosion control for construction. So we make sure that we have enough covered if a project, defaults and moves along and there's some remediation, we have that fee that can go to site remediation. That really rarely happens on a small scale, but on some of these large scales, like was mentioned, the redevelopment at the Heavenly Village gondola, that was the city of South Lake Tahoe. And we don't collect performance bonds and do. There have been some examples where we've worked through issues related to concerns, like during the recession, when a lot of projects were stopping, starting, stopping again on a case-by-case basis. But typically we don't do performance bonds for large commercial, but we do for every project have a smaller security deposit that we hold in trust. And when the project is completed, our inspectors do an inspection and they sign that off from our perspectives, and then we can return that security. And so that's generally our process, and the amount of money is commensurate with what it would cost to make sure the water quality erosion control measures are installed.
Great, and so you could use that fund left there then to mitigate whatever impact on that water was, like with the tour we saw today, actually.
Yes.
That kind of really got me thinking about, had that not, what was going to happen there?
That's right. And we've actually had questions from our governing board. We don't put liens on people's properties in the way that like a local jurisdiction can do. We've had inquiries, could we figure out a way to do that for those kinds of situations? We have enforcement actions that we can bring. So if a property is vacant and there is a gross violation of water quality, we've stepped in. Generally, we're trying, to make sure that there's, wattles and there are erosion control measures in place. But when a property is in bankruptcy, like it's complicated. I mean, it's a challenge. There's no question about it. But happy to give you some more examples to follow up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Reagan. Great presentation. I want to go back a little bit to the mitigation funds, fund by fund, and the disbursements and the contributions. And so there's a pretty big difference in the mobility mitigation fund. And I know that's a newer concept. So are there projects in the pipeline that just haven't caught up yet? Is it a timing thing? Is it a process issue? Can you talk a little bit more about the process as far as, is it only local jurisdictions that are eligible for this to get the disbursements? Are these grants? Educate me.
I can take a quick shot. I think that's purely down to a timing thing. It's literally just the transfer of air quality to mobility mitigation. I want to say is 2 years, around that time frame. So I think we will start to see that catch up. We do have a couple coming within the next couple of months, and then we'll slowly start to see that creep up. I think that covers that.
Thank you, Assemblymember Julie Reagan. Just to follow up, and we'll be happy to get you more information on that. I do think it is a timing thing, and they also would go to local jurisdictions for projects that would benefit air quality and transportation.
All right, committee members, anything else? Thank you so much, and for doing not only a great job with the presentation, but with the substantial and detailed questions. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
That concludes that agenda item, and we are now moving on to a presentation on sustainable development in the Tahoe Basin, presented by the Tahoe Prosperity Center. We're delighted to have you here. Please introduce yourself and begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Sarah Schmidt, spelled SARAHSCHMIDT, and I am joined in just a second by my colleague, Derek Martin. And thank you, Chair Golding and the rest of the committee for having us here this afternoon. We are actually going to speak a little bit more on community economic development and one of our sort of place-based sustainable development programs, Tahoe Wood. And with that, I would also like to kind of reintroduce or introduce Tahoe Prosperity Center for those who are unfamiliar or perhaps need a reintroduction into what we do and the role we play here in the basin. The Tahoe Prosperity Center was founded in 2011 out of an Economic Development Authority grant to really look at the opportunities and barriers to a regional sustainable economic development initiative, sustainable economic Tahoe, natural resource that is our biggest drive in terms of recreation and outdoor tourism here in the region. So that initial 2011 grant produced what we call and is still used quite often and referred to as the Measuring Prosperity And then the Prosperity Playbook, which helps to outline the complexity of those drivers when we talk about sustainable economic development. And then also the role that Tahoe Prosperity plays within that in terms of, again, playing a convener, connector, and really that sort of coordination and collaboration role here. As the only bi-state community economic development organization, we are a nonprofit 501c3. Really that role is to help work with across, again, bi-state, multi-jurisdiction, working with our destination management organizations, with our chambers, with our local governments, but also a big part of that, and we'll get into that in a minute, of the programs that we help drive forward. But some of those strategic priorities that we have are really looking at, again, sort of when we're looking at a healthy economy, those small businesses, local small businesses and entrepreneurs are really a health indicator of how well our economy is doing. And we saw that when either during COVID, during the recession, during fires, all of those things, when we're talking about a heavily tourism-based economy, are susceptible to shocks. And so how do we really look at resilience from that community economic development perspective? So a big part of that is focusing on entrepreneurial and small business support, innovation and resilience, and then also around regional collaboration and data. And I'll share just a little bit about each one of those strategic priorities and some of the programs that we're doing in that. And then obviously we have an internal, sort of in terms of organizational resilience as a nonprofit in the region. And then really, again, what we're looking at when we talk about, our mission and vision as a nonprofit and as a community organization is then how are we bringing those multi-actors across this region and really understanding that an economy is an ecosystem within itself. And so when an ecosystem gets out of balance, things become unhealthy, just like if you're looking at forest health. And so really understanding that all of those players have to come together and you have to look at it as a holistic, both a problem, but also holistic solutions. And so that's where when we really talk about that sort of, stronger foundation in terms of insights, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the data initiatives when we get into that program and some of the original data that we do collect. And then in terms of that action and collaboration, making sure that we are working, again, across the basin with organizations like the Destination Stewardship Council. Again, knowing that when we're talking about an economy and an ecosystem-based economy like ours, we need to be looking at stewardship. We also are an organization, we call ourselves a triple bottom line. That means that we are focused on community, the economy, and our natural resources. So that's something that we're always looking at when we're talking about balancing for economic development in the region. With that, I'm going to move to the next. I had mentioned I'll do a little bit of highlighting on some of the programs that we do, and then we'll go in depth a little bit more on Tahoe Wood and talking about sort of place-based capture for some of those tourism dollars to be able to stay here in the region. I mentioned that first one around small business and entrepreneurial support. We support things like the Tahoe Inc. Roundtables, which is peer-to-peer small business learning, where again, small businesses can meet together, talk about similar challenges that they have. How did you, get your sort of either permit passed through your jurisdiction? Hey, I'm thinking about expanding from Nevada into California. What considerations do I need to think about? So that's, I think, really important. And when we talk about convening, just in the last 2 years, over 150 entrepreneurs being supported through those peer-to-peer roundtables that we facilitate once a month around the lake. The other piece too is recognizing that our communities are also bilingual, and so making sure that there is accessible and culturally sensitive material related to small business development center advising here in the region with a bilingual small business development center advisor locally to help support those communities here in our region. The second one I want to talk about is that that sort of second pillar when we talk about our strategic priorities around innovation and resilience. our tourism economy again and our outdoor recreation is highly dependent, and all of our businesses here in terms of place-based economy on the health of our forests and also public safety. Just in the last year, we secured more than $70,000 of private funding for public safety in order to install or secure 3 cameras to support the alert wildfire camera system through UNR. Again, that's direct impact in terms of public safety and wildfire mitigation and prevention here in the region, which again is a big impact on our economy when we do have a forest fire. I had promised Devin's going to speak a little bit more on that Tahoe wood and what we're looking at in terms of regenerative economies, and again, how to really look at our place-based economy more sustainably. And then the third one there in terms of our strategic priorities, looking at that regional collaboration and data. We do collect original data. We do this by going out and canvassing our businesses, our local communities, and hosting one this October. And what that really does is it puts our volunteers, our jurisdictions, our community leaders in direct contact with our local businesses to really better understand what those challenges, again, barriers and opportunities they face, and that we can sort of roll up into a regional diagnosis of what are those critical areas that they're really concerned about that we can help support them. No surprise, the 2024 business walk that we facilitated, highlighted things like workforce housing, highlighted things like workforce, available workforce. It highlighted things like connectivity. So those are all themes I think we know, but it's good to have that direct voice at the small business community level. And then the last one, we just held our annual Tahoe Economic Summit. And that brings together, again, community leaders, jurisdictional leaders, economists. We had 2 keynote speakers, Dr. Fred Steinman from University of Nevada, Reno, presented on their recent study on outdoor recreation and tourism in Nevada, and on some of those missed opportunities when we talk about keeping some of that supply chain more locally and sourcing more locally. And that, again, directly relates to the program that we're going to highlight in a minute on Tahoe wood. With that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Derek Martin.
Hello, everybody. Derek Martin, DERRICK-MARTIN, Technical Director with the Tahoe Prosperity Center. And I'm excited to present to you today on our Tahoe wood program, something we've been really kicking off, as Sarah mentioned, our version of community economic development, using the community's voice and listening and following these priorities to kind of dictate what we need. We've all realized that housing is a big part of what we're working on here to keep this as a place where you can live and work in Tahoe. So Tahoe wood really aims to keep local wood local and available for projects like we saw this morning. A lot of times now, due to past regulatory changes on different sectors, we've really had a lack of local mills and available California lumber. Part of our recent projects that we piloted, even when we went out to build and show this, we couldn't actually find local California timber available here locally. We could find local sellers, but that mill was eventually shipped to Oregon, processed back in and stamped. So one of these things we're IDing from the top level of, if we're looking at redevelopment projects on the large scale, how can we get wood that we know was here at one point and stacked in a pile into the woods? How can we keep that here and develop it? And in doing so, how can we use that to empower local youth, local workers, and local artisans to really make this an attractive product? And we have the benefit of knowing that many of this was built into our building code long ago. And many of the buildings built with some of these new methods that we're trying to talk about aren't really new. They're in churches from the 1600s and buildings that have been around for hundreds of years in Europe. So instead of trying to do a cheaper, quicker method, we're really looking at using small scale cottage manufacturers, people with workspace in a garage, like items you can provide locally to make bespoke panels like we often saw in the drawings earlier today that will do, acoustical designs, structural designs, ADUs that really have these thick roofs from the local Tahoe lumber that will stand up to snow loads. So we're really using and picturing these local items and using our Tahoe wood program to come up with 10 business plans to show an idea of, hey, you can go from ADU to what we were piloting out in Truckee at the Hobart Mills demo site, which was a dorm of 10 individual units built into one, with a much lower price point per unit than we're typically seeing on a lot of expenditure. So using what they used to have there, they're living in the forest in trailers and in what was previously condemned housing, and replacing that with local timber that they've milled on site. They've actually milled and dried this very low impact. There's been 0 vehicles mile traveled. The lumber has stayed on site. And then we were actually able to use some of our partners. We partner with the Berkeley Wood Lab, the Stanford Innovation Lab, and often the MIT Graduate School of Architecture and Design. And they'll use Tahoe as a marketing agent. And with their doing this, they can also put back in to what works here locally. How can we get through some of these planning and designs ahead of time and show what's available in the market and build the market from both ends? One, from the wood on the ground, and 2, from very nice bespoke drawings that can get people excited about, what ADU do I want to put in my backyard? If I have a very large, nice property, what is suitable to this? What do I want to put back into the community? So having this project end with a connection of everything from transit shelters and park benches and local picnic tables we see all over with local wood, to options for dorm style workforce housing, structured ADUs, and other options. So having that end goal to decrease waste while increasing kind of financially feasible work in the area for people that maybe came here on a seasonal job, maybe were a J1 visa at some point, but decided to stay here, you know, in the correct manner and want to find a local business to register and want to know how we can do this appropriately, pay their taxes and go through. So this is the financially feasible models they will have at the end to turn our local timber that's found here through local contracts into different business ideas. We'll show 10, but realistically the possibilities are endless using, you know, the diversity in the local artisan area and also our engineers and builders to say, hey, we want these panels in our home. Who can build this? And these methods aren't complicated. They've been in the building code. There's a low time frame to upkeep, and it's very easy for builders to figure out, you know, how to make these panels in a simple manner. So really reducing these vehicles mile travels and increasing our community benefit through locally sourced wood products, like you can see in the building in the lower right. That is a 10-person dorm. That is really identified to hopefully be placed on Forest Service land that can be replicated ideally all across the country and sourced from wood right on the site there. So we went out there, made the jig, milled the wood, and we're right in process right now of using this and showing these smaller ideas like transit shelters and benches, and hopefully ending up with a goalpost on the other side of large scale ADUs and workforce and employee housing. And with that, I'll really close on the Tahoe wood and open it up for some questions.
Committee members, questions? Senator, go ahead.
Thank you. That's actually very encouraging, and somebody actually has some common sense, and that's always encouraging also. Do you have any association with the mill at the bottom of Spooner Summit?
I have association with a lot of the mills and coordination and putting them into a development pipeline so people know they exist. I don't know of that mill specifically. What was the name of it? The Tahoe Wood Products. Okay, at the bottom of Spooner. Yep, we recently actually helped complete a California stateside grant for $3.3 million to just get some of that institutional knowledge from the universities on their planning side as an in-kind donation, as well as some of my work, and then filling out the last part of that workforce training development pipeline. So really trying to use our local schools to associate with that and help that last degree of funding to tie it into the local economy.
Well, when we took a tour of that, it was quite impressive in the amount of wood that's available and the help actually, in my mind, of the environment here by a place to take the trees that are being thinned. And I just wanted to make sure that you weren't in your own little pod or your own little silo when there's other people looking at the same ideas. And so I wanted to make sure that there's good communication everywhere, but I love the idea and love the thought.
I really appreciate that question. And just to follow up on that really briefly, they do cross laminated timber, which you would take some of the nicest material to. And the demo we just did was for nail laminated timber, which is really taking a 2x4, putting them on their side and nailing them together with a nail gun. It's already in the code. There's certain nails and spacing, but realistically this would be doing for lower value wood. So we would take the things to Alpenglow Timber Mill. Ideally, you could even buy these materials from David and make these secondary lower cost but high value materials from that. And we would work in coordination.
Members, any other questions? Online? Excellent job. Thank you for your presentation. And it looks like that's it on questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have, that concludes that agenda item. We have one more set of presentations today on innovative housing projects. We've got St. Joseph's Community Land Trust, Tahoe Housing Hub, and Placer County. We've got everybody here. Thank you all so much. We're delighted to have you here also and look forward to your presentation. Please introduce yourselves and proceed when you're ready.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair Golding, members of the committee. My name is Nikki Streegan, that's spelled N-I-K-K-I, last name S-T-R-E-E-G-A-N.
Good afternoon. My name is Erin Casey, E-R-I-N-C-A-S-E-Y, and I am the CEO for the Tahoe Housing Hub.
Good afternoon. I'm Gene Diaz, that's J-E-A-N-D-I-A-Z, Executive Director for St. Joseph Community Land Trust.
And we are here today to talk about some of the programs and projects that we're working on in the basin, and I'm going to kick us off. Again, Nikki Streegan, I'm with Placer County. I'm the housing manager, and I work in the county executive office in our housing and economic development division. As many of you know, Placer County is a wide spanning jurisdiction. It goes from all the way in the Sacramento Valley, where we have very fast growing communities like the city of Roseville, city of Rockland, and Lincoln, through the Sierra Nevada foothills and all the way to the north shore of Lake Tahoe. And I can't underscore enough the interplay between Washoe County and the north shore of Lake Tahoe, the south side of the lake, and even the community, the town of Truckee, and the connections that there are there between housing and the crisscross with jurisdictional lines. The image on the screen before you is of a housing action plan that our county has. This is a framework that helps to sort of serve as an engine for our housing element. In California, we have those that's a component of our general plan. This is sort of our North Star, and it sets the framework for our work over the next few years. We are aiming for construction of or creation of 1,300 achievable units. I heard in the public comment earlier, the multitude of ways to describe the types of housing there are. This term we're using is designed to achieve an array of income levels. So lower income, moderate income, local workers with no income limits, and so forth. 300 of those units are our focus on the North Shore of Lake Tahoe. The balance of that, of course, is for the western part of the county. And so we break this into 4 goals: to build, preserve, collaborate, and fund. And some of the programs that I'm going to touch on exhibit some of these things. So as it relates to building housing, we have a new developer incentive program to create new units in eastern Placer County. It's designed to activate private development. It's called Launchpad. And we provide a disbursement of $50,000 to $200,000 per unit in exchange for a deed restriction that will be a 55-year long restriction and limit the rental or purchase of the unit to only local workers. We've released 2 NOFAs to date. Last year, we released one for $1 million in sort of seed funding, and you can see what was awarded was a 3-unit multifamily project and 1 accessory dwelling unit. We are currently in the process of reviewing 2026 applications under a second NOFA. You can see we've rolled some funds from the first NOFA over for over $3 million in incentives. We're currently reviewing 12 applications, and then the type of housing we're seeing, you can see this diversity of typology that folks have been talking about. That's come to light here, and we see apartments, multiplexes, so 4plexes are in that fold, ADUs, those are accessory dwelling units, as was mentioned, and tiny homes on wheels, another sort of innovation that we're seeing in the market. As it relates to preservation, which we see as a really important tactic in the basin, there's 2 programs that we operate. One is called the Lease to Locals Rental Program. To date, we have committed approximately $1.4 million in incentives with an average disbursement of $9,000 per property. This program incentivizes conversion of a short-term rental, so something that's been rented on an Airbnb type platform, to a long-term lease for a local worker. 147 properties have participated to date, and we have housed 286 local workers through the program. The Workforce Housing Preservation Program, or WIP program, is our home ownership program, and that program offers a 15% incentive for either the purchase price up to $150,000 maximum in exchange for a deed restriction that says a local worker will live in that home for a period of 55 years. And so we have 17 properties enrolled in that program. The average disbursement you can see on the screen is $110,000, and we're serving certainly above moderate income home buyers. That's not abnormal, but you can see the average AMI is 145%. I think the last thing I'll note before I pass on the presentation is one of our greatest ongoing needs, and that is funding. Not unusual for the state of California or around the nation. You know, the subsidy that is required to achieve deeper levels of affordability that the market can't otherwise produce is immense. These programs have historically been funded through transient occupancy tax dollars that have aligned with business support through the formation of a business improvement district in partnership with business organizations, and we are fortunate for that. So I'll pass it on to Jean for your slides.
Thank you. Again, Jean Diaz, Executive Director, St. Joseph Community Land Trust. St. Joseph Community Land Trust has been around for over 20 years now. We are registered in both Nevada and California, and I believe we are the only community land trust that exists in the country that is by state. So we cover both states. Our main office is Zephyr Cove, Nevada. We also have a small office in South Lake Tahoe in California. A little tidbit, historical tidbit, the use of the word trust in community land trust. A prior committee of this committee passed legislation that allowed us to use trust in our name. So that benefits not only us, but all of the future community land trusts in Nevada that before that legislation that your committee helped pass could not use the word trust. So a little bit of historical tidbit for this committee. Thank you. So up to now, we've been focused on new housing, expanding affordable housing. And we've done that in two ways, focused on low-income rental. Excuse me. Sierra Garden is a 76-unit, 1 and 2 bedroom apartment complex in South Lake Tahoe. Sugar Pine Village is our newest project, 248 units, studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. And both of those projects, the income limits are 30 to 60% of area median income. We also have focused on moderate income ownership. And 2 projects there, Talac House and our Riverside Avenue project. Those are moderate income ownership projects. The lead-in slide for this presentation was a larger picture of our Riverside Avenue project. It's 3 homes, 2 2-bedroom and 1 3-bedroom home. These are done using the community land trust model where we retain ownership of the land, which was donated to us by the city of South Lake Tahoe. We then built the homes and we sold the homes to income qualified homeowners that now own the home subject to a 99-year ground lease where we control the use and resale to be sure it's permanently affordable. Just as a matter of looking at the amount of benefit, there's a 40% discount from the appraised value to the purchase price for these homeowners, over 40% discount for them. So that's a significant benefit for home ownership. We also have provided supportive programs, including homebuyer education, financial literacy courses, motel to home. We have had a program where we discovered that there were a lot of families with school-aged children living in motels. Not a great environment to raise children. So we developed a program where we helped over 36 children that were living in motels to move into affordable or quality affordable rental environment. We also provide cybersecurity courses for our tenants and our owners, as well as emergency grants. When Calder Fire came through a couple of years ago, our Sierra Garden tenants had to evacuate. Everybody did. We provided through this grant program funding for our tenants that needed financial help to go through that evacuation experience. So that's what we've done in the past. What we've realized is, besides new construction, we need to focus on preserving the existing housing stock. And that's come up through a lot of the conversations earlier today. So we've developed a new program, the Tahoe Affordable Home Ownership Enabling Program. Next slide, please. So what does this program do? This program is designed to preserve the existing housing stock, the existing, to the extent it naturally affordable existing housing stock. That's an oxymoron, I realize, affordable in Lake Tahoe, but we're doing our best. So 3 pillars for this program. We can help an income qualified household that's looking to buy a home. We can help them provide the down payment that's necessary to get into that home. We can also, if we have an opportunity to buy a home, we don't have a potential buyer lined up to help them, we can buy a home, do whatever necessary rehab is there, and then resell it to an income qualified household. The 3rd pillar is to help an existing family living in a home and they're at risk of losing that home. Elderly couple, they're about to be kicked out because they need rehab work. We can help them stay in that home. The other situation there is, and a good example is our first project under this program, the Osborne home. It was a family that's a tenant family. They've been renting for 11 years. Elderly homeowner, she's getting ready to sell, 90-some years old. She doesn't want the headache of managing this house anymore. The tenants were freaking out. We're going to get displaced. Where are we going to go? So the risk was they're going to lose it. There's going to be a buyer in the market, tear down this older home, and right next to it is a McMansion that was built, and that's happening a lot. So we were able to step in, help this family through down payment and some of the rehab expenses, help them become homeowners. They now own that home. We own the land, they own the home, so they're building equity and they have secure housing. So we think this is a very exciting program. And we talked about a lot in the earlier conversations about new construction. We also need to preserve what exists. And our experience in providing new housing is the subsidies for new housing are really tremendous, and going through all of the entitlement process has a lot of cost and a lot of time. So we think this is an important adjunct to our expanding new housing. Next. So constraints and solutions. A lot of that's been talked about already. Access to land and improvements for us is a big one, right? So we've been able to get land. Sugar Pine Village was built on surplus state of California land. Our Riverside project was surplus City of South Lake Tahoe land. There's not a whole lot of opportunities to get land like that. So we're working on estate planning ideas. If elderly people, they don't know what to do, they don't have a family to, thank you. They don't have a family to leave the property to, they can leave it to us. We're a 501c3, they get a tax write-off of state benefits. So we're working on that as another way to get land and homes into the program. Construction and rehab process and expenses. We talked about that. In terms of solutions, a lot of work that TRPA is doing in the City of South Lake Tahoe and other agencies to try to streamline the process. That's critical. We also are working on foundation grants, individual corporate donations, in-kind donations, partnerships. Sugar Pine Village, Sierra Garden are both partnerships where we partner with large-scale developers. We're the local presence to be sure it's done right and to steward that project. One of the important things, I think this is an issue that I think Assemblymember Golding has talked about in the past, and that's insurance. Insurance, especially for affordable housing, is becoming critical in California and in Nevada. The lenders want to be sure that you have fire insurance. And if you can't get fire insurance, or if the costs skyrocket, it really affects the feasibility of affordable housing projects. So we really need to focus on that, I think. Capacity building, we are a nonprofit, so we depend on individual, corporate, monetary in-kind donations, foundation grants, and we use our project revenue. We generate revenue from Sugar Pine Village and Sierra Garden. We use that to help fund our sustainability. Next slide. So here's more information. If you want to get more information about us, there's some QR code links there to our website. That's a pretty picture of our building in Zephyr Cove. On the right is a link to an article that was recently done about the Sugar Pine Village project and the importance of partnerships to achieve affordable housing. So that may be an article of interest for you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. One more time, Erin Casey, CEO for the Tahoe Housing Hub. And I'd like to start by telling you a brief story about Amy. Just over a year ago, when we interviewed Amy was a third grade teacher teaching at Kings Beach Elementary School. She had one son. They were living together in a one-bedroom place. He was sleeping in the bedroom. She was sleeping in the kitchen, driving to work every day, looking for more secure housing, worrying every day if she was going to be able to stay in the community. Up on the screen, you see a picture there of the bike worker, somebody working in a restaurant. All of our essential workers that we need in this community are in need of housing. The information you'll see that I included in there is referenced by, it's a recent study that TRPA did to talk about the unmet needs in the Tahoe Basin, and it speaks to commuters as well. You've heard a little bit about that today. That conversation has come up. Also the median home price on the Nevada side in the Tahoe Basin. But I also want to say that I do know that this is not just a Tahoe Basin challenge. It's a global challenge, depending on where you are, certainly a national challenge and a statewide challenge. And one of the solutions that the Tahoe Housing Hub has been working on is something that is starting to work in the Tahoe Basin and has real potential to do more in Nevada as well. Next slide, please. And that solution are tiny homes on wheels. I actually have a model here. If you're interested in looking at it later, this is a particular tiny home on wheels. It's the same one that's in the photo on the left-hand side. That particular model is important to our community in Tahoe because it is the only model we've been able to find that can deal with the snow load requirements that we have. Many of the models haven't been able to do that. Now, what I wanted to do was compare a tiny home on wheels. And just to be clear, there are tiny homes that go on foundations and there are tiny homes on wheels. And that's an important distinction. Tiny homes on wheels, many people think, because they are licensed and certified through the DMV, are the same as recreational vehicles. And I wanted to compare the two for you today, just to show you the difference between the models in terms of how they are constructed and how they are certified. So the tiny home on wheels on the left, and then your traditional recreational vehicle on the right. The certification standards, as you can see, I'm not going to read through this, are different. And that's because the quality of the materials used is quite different as well. These are built on the left to be longer-term full-time housing, unlike recreational vehicles. The model that you see up there, when fully installed in the Tahoe Basin, is $200,000. That includes all the prep work, planning, and install. That's quite different than $850,000, as I showed you earlier, per house in Tahoe. And this is a unit that has to be engineered to meet snow load. There are other units that could serve areas that don't have those same snow load requirements. Both in the state of Nevada are classified as recreational vehicles. And so that limits the opportunity to utilize a tiny home on wheels as an accessory dwelling unit, which is something that we're starting to see in the state of California and across the country. Next slide, please. So the Tahoe Housing Hub has a program called the ADU Accelerator. And what we do is we provide free technical assistance to property owners who are interested in building accessory dwelling units for the workforce. And for a period of time when we were doing this up here, stick-built products were incredibly expensive. So our homeowners would sign up, meet with us, realize the cost, and drop out, stop moving forward at that point. So we thought, well, we've either got to get better financing. Unfortunately, we can't control interest rates, wish we could, or bring the cost of construction down. So we started looking for products, prefab products, factory-built products, tiny homes on wheels. And we found this product with a great business partner. Our program went from 0 ADUs that were going to be constructed to 20 coming through this summer in the Tahoe Basin on the California side. These are in people's backyards. There are a couple churches that are participating in our program and plan to put several of these units on their property. And then these will be available to the workforce in the fall. So what I wanted to mention to you all to make it really relevant to Nevada are pathways that you might be able to consider to make it so that these units could be considered for accessory dwelling units and used in different communities and backyards. Because at the current state, or at this time, really, they have to be placed in parks because they're considered or classified like recreational vehicles are. So they're in this weird in-between category right now. And other thing I wanted to mention is this particular unit is certified by something called NOAA Plus, which means that they are designing and building these to meet IRC standards or building code standards. So they're going above and beyond. And because of that, there are jurisdictions, I have examples up there for you, that are building that language into their code changes. They're saying we're open to tiny homes on wheels. They're allowed if they are NOAA Plus certified, which ensures that they are constructed to building code standards. So I wanted to give you some options to consider. And you have a pilot taking place up here in Tahoe right now, one that's successful, one where we will have several of these models on the ground this summer, rented by the fall, and something that could expand into the state in a much bigger way with more options than what we have up here given the snow load constraints. And so I think that's it for me. I'll conclude my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think our first question is from Assemblyman Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I have some questions about the ADUs and the tiny homes on wheels. First, could you just talk a little bit more about why this is kind of the solution versus a tiny home that's not on wheels, that goes on a foundation, like around either the price point, the production? Why is this the solution that you guys have honed in on?
Yeah, the price point is a big one. It's less expensive for these units to be installed, and that's what we're finding with our property owners. Is we're working with homeowners that have land. We're working with different organizations, and they want to help, but they only have so much in terms of resource when it comes to investing and then making the property, or excuse me, the home available for tenants, because part of what they also want to do is keep the rents low, right? So the more they spend on the product itself, the harder it is to keep the rents below those affordable ranges. And just to be clear, these are absolutely a solution for the traditional affordable housing, meaning 80% and below. They're affordable by design in many ways, but the tiny homes on wheels, and in our case, just to be clear as well, our construction season is quite limited given the climate, right? And so we have intense limitations. So the fact that these can be built in other locations and brought here also makes a substantial difference in our area. It's really about finding the right product as well as finding the right partner, I think. And that's something we vetted 33 companies before we found this one, and we're quite excited about it. I hope that answers your question.
It does. May I have a follow-up, Chair?
Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So then the other question I had is, I'm kind of familiar with this in-between weird territory, kind of traditional manufactured housing or mobile homes kind of fall into some of these gray areas as well. So could you just talk a little bit about the tweaks and essentially kind of a little bit more about the standards that would have to be met for this to kind of be considered, permanent long-term housing and get that certificate of occupancy?
Great question. It depends on the state.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute. Will you
course.
state your name for the record
Oh,
when you
absolutely.
each time?
Thank you.
It will help.
Yes, getting
Folks down
lost
the
in the
line.
moment. Thank you. Erin Casey, CEO at the Tahoe Housing Hub. Yes, so it depends on the state. It depends on the local jurisdiction. So in some cases, to answer your question, for example, Nevada County on the California side has passed an ordinance that specifically states that tiny homes on wheels are considered permanent units and can be occupied on a full-time basis. So that's one example where it's happening at the jurisdictions level. There are other cases where the state will make that decision itself, and it will layer in things like NOAA Plus as a requirement on top of the ANSI standards to ensure that the products that are being utilized as permanent housing that are on wheels are in fact meeting building code standards. There are efforts at the national level working with the ICC to include in Appendix BB specific language around tiny homes on wheels to address that very loop or that gap that you're speaking of. And so that's currently being discussed at that level. And in some cases, because states and or local jurisdictions don't want to wait for that to occur, they're passing their own ordinances and then adding the NOAA Plus requirements. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. That's extremely helpful. And again, I think based on kind of, my understanding, both of traditional manufactured housing as well as tiny homes on wheels, I'm just glad that you brought this to our attention. I think it is something that we should be proactive on. If we're allowing folks to live in manufactured housing, I think there should also be a pathway for this, and that it can be one piece of addressing housing affordability and accessibility. So thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you, Chair, for the questions.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee members? Thank you very much for the presentation.
Oh, may I ask a question, Chair?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And thank you for this presentation. You may have touched on this, but are there areas in Lake Tahoe that have already been identified that would be ideal for these tiny homes on wheels, or were they already being utilized?
On the California side, Erin Casey, for the record. On the California side in North Lake Tahoe, where we are currently operating, we have several properties there. Private property that will be installing these units this summer. Some are individual homeowners, others are churches, and there is a couple actually that just bought a property in Kings Beach who are looking to create a tiny home village in the Kings Beach area as well. So our client base is broadening in the area as people are becoming familiar with this product and seeing the potential and possibilities with it. So you do, I would say, have an opportunity to see how it unfolds in the North Lake Tahoe area on the California side to assess whether or not it's something you would have interest in.
Thank you so much.
Senator Chase.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It brought to my attention that you use Pahrump as kind of an example of where these homes exist. And one of the things that I know in Pahrump, Nevada, is issues with the utilities and septic systems and wells. And I'm wondering, and that's a real problem. And I'm wondering if you have these units, are they all going to be set up on a public utility system? Will they be charged the mitigation fees as they would with any other development that the folks have come in and been charged these fees? And I'm just trying to look at the impact of putting up a bunch of these modulars, water use, utilities, and quality there.
Erin Casey, for the record. Senator Titus, yes, thank you for the question. Yes, you have to they have to have their own separate utilities. They have to be connected like any other would and pay utility fees. Any kind of impact fee that would be associated with, for example, any accessory dwelling unit or any single family residence. Now, it depends on where you are in California. If the unit is of a certain size, for example, if it is an accessory dwelling unit under 750 or under 500 square feet, there are certain fees that are waived. And in this case, these tiny homes on wheels are 400 square feet, but they are permitted like any other ADU or single family home, depending on what they are. And the utility companies also, including fire, all are part of that process. And you have to have separate utilities associated with these for them to be permitted.
So these small homes that have a family and 5 kids and using the bathrooms, et cetera, are not going to be charged the fee that the family putting in 1 or 2 bathrooms would be charged? I mean, how does that equate? I mean, so I'm just trying to understand, because there's impact from this. If you're doing a whole bunch of houses in a small little area and they're using the utilities, whether they paid $200,000 for the home or $800,000, the bodily functions are the same.
Right.
And so and the impacts are the same. But now you're going to kind of quadruple those impacts and not have them pay any of the impact.
So thank you, Aaron Casey, for the record. Thank you for the question. I think it depends on whether or not the unit is being put in place as an accessory dwelling unit, which is one pathway. If there are several going in and another, it's multifamily, in which case multifamily permitting processes and ordinances and requirements would be applied to that project to address the very thing you are mentioning. And so that's the case for some of the things that we're seeing is if there are several of them being put in, they are being treated like multifamily developments and they are being charged fees. It's just that if it's a small unit in California, which is what I'm most familiar with, honestly, some of those fees are waived if they are being rented or sold as affordable housing units. That's the difference.
Just follow up on that. So when you waive a fee, that doesn't mean there's not cost incurred. So then is that they didn't pay anything, do the rates for the people who are paying go up because there's the impact that you've waived these fees and now there's more impact on people who are paying fees?
Well, that would these are state and in some cases local jurisdiction laws. And so I can't answer those questions. Some of this is what the state of California's made decisions to do through legislative action to incentivize affordable housing development. And so I can't speak to all of the thinking that goes behind that, to be honest with you. I just know that if a unit, especially an accessory dwelling unit in California, is of a certain size, certain fees are waived so that it's more feasible to put the product in place. Now, whether or not that's something you would want to do, that's up for you all to consider. And I don't know how they've managed to think through the very questions you're asking me. So I'm sorry I don't have more information on that piece.
So I do have a couple questions based on some of that on the utility hookup, the various things. So how exactly does that work? They have to have their own water meter, gas meter, they're hooked up to actual sewer,
yes,
into a septic. So all of those things have to be
that's correct,
dug and placed separately.
Right.
So it's not on a septic system, but they all have their own meter or whatever it might be.
Well, if the primary property is on septic, then they're going to have to go through a process, and there's a different approach. Again, if I may, Aaron Casey, for the record, if I may say, I am most familiar with California. So it may be that what's required in the state of Nevada is different. So I don't want to say the things that I'm saying. So in California, on some of the properties that we work on, if there is septic, there are studies that have to be done before an accessory dwelling unit or anything is put in place to determine whether or not that system is going to be able to accommodate an additional unit, right, with the people that are going to be inside of that unit. So that's how that would work. But yes, they have separate setups, separate hookups. That's part of the process. They have to have separate meters. And so they would be treated just like any other accessory dwelling unit or single family property or multifamily as it relates to code.
Do they primarily work off of electricity, so there's no gas or propane, none of that, or is it just electric?
Yes. Electric.
Electric.
Sorry, Shelley Purdy behind me is the one that manages this program. She's a little more knowledgeable about the specifics than I am.
So the 200,000 fully installed, that includes all of the hookups and various things?
Yes, I have the confirmation, yes.
Yeah. No, thank you. I was just trying to figure out how it actually works. And I'm with my colleague that you probably shouldn't use Pahrump as an example. I kid our friends in Pahrump.
I think we may have one more question. Is that right, Senator Scheibel? Or no? Nope. Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much. Appreciate all of you being here today. That concludes our presentations for today. And our last agenda item is our closing public comment. If you would like to give public comment, please approach the table now.
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Hughes. I'm going to make a comment under two hats today. I am on the board of the North Tahoe Public Utility District that serves Kings Beach and the area that discussed. We have not had conversations as a board about these ADUs and the hookups and the impacts. It does not support our growth forecast at this point in time. So I will say I am concerned, and I know these units as well. They are not set up to really put into our infrastructure. There are also a couple of small utilities within our infrastructure that are private that I'm sure we have not talked to either. So let's be clear about the communication in these assets and what we're installing. So secondly, I'm here really about the utility issue and the cost and what's going on. I am Tahoe Spark, and I'm sure you've heard me in the news because it's made national news. I have been working for the last 2 years. Last night, I had an email from a high school student named Sam from Berkeley. He's working on a research paper about data centers and their impacts on Lake Tahoe. I don't think he's ever been to Lake Tahoe, but he wrote because he's worried about what he's reading in the news. International outlets are covering the pressures on Lake Tahoe, the energy instability, wildfire risks, and rising costs, and declining populations. And he asked how he could help me. I didn't know what to tell him because somehow we can't seem to talk about these issues that are on the international media and honestly talk about them here and what is happening, not at TRPA meetings, not at the oversight meetings, not at the public utility commissions of either California or Nevada, and not at the institutions that are set in place to oversee this area. We all know Liberty is a limited liability utility structurally tied to Berkshire Hathaway, operating inside the wholesale market of NV Energy. Well, we all know that the communities are paying for the price of the decisions made upstream. So we hope that you actually do an investigative look at this. We are losing our power due to Nevada not serving us and choosing to serve data centers.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you, and feel free to submit the rest of your comments in writing. Thank you.
Laura Koski, Laurakoscky. I have a list here, so we're at critical mass with Lake Tahoe. You're inviting way too many people. I'm not for a concrete jungle. Nevada is building a golf course, wanting to build 35,000 more homes. The farmers are concerned, the horse community, the traffic. We've just been having accidents. 580, 10 people just died. The other highway near the casinos, horrible accidents. And this is just moving too fast, and it's a global concern. The aquifers may dry up in 20 years. That's going to affect everybody. This 6.5% increase in utilities, that's going to hit us extremely hard. $20,000 fines are going for people that are not pulling permits for their driveways. It's an excessive overreach. This has happened to many people in our community. They fine them $20,000 if they didn't pull a permit, and then they harass them. And that Chris Bear, he needs to be fired. Drug testing for all mayors and city council. Maybe have a Lyft driver up there at Inspiration Point to help those tourists get down. You know, they're going up there for sunset views, and then they're stuck all night because they don't realize you can't just come down. This shuttle's not working. Too many tickets are giving. 160 homes are for sale, and that's because the interest rates are up. I think we need to have our roads. You got to come up with the right concrete cement that can handle the saturation of all the snow. Maybe check into Germany or whatnot. You can't just keep paving and leaving all these potholes. And more Coast Guards on the lake. We just had another capsized boat. 2 people died. And exploitation of employees. You want to build. All the employees are going crazy. They have to pay $900 a month, and they're only making $20 an hour. Some of them are only making $17. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ellie Waller, WALLER. I appreciate the questions from the members today. Vehicle miles traveled, always a hot button. More specifically, requirements exactly where has TRPA has not achieved their goals established with the 2012 regional plan goals and policies. A rolling scale for out-year achievement goals isn't satisfactory with no repercussions. More specifically, an example of a large project was brought up earlier. The Latitude 39 project, which is now for sale, was a consent item. 40 luxury condos. I could go into all those details. The traffic study is what I'm speaking about. It was done by a consultant. There are thresholds at 1,300 VMT. It came in at 1,298 conveniently. It was challenged by some of the members. It did not go back for restudy as requested by one of the senior members last day. These are the kinds of things that we need to follow up on. The other topics today, Tahoe Blue Event Center, the environmental impact study baseline, again, has never had to come to fruition because they couldn't do it. And so what was wrong with that process? We really do need to focus on the VMT. The Biltmore was also brought up. The demolition needs to happen. Somebody needs to hold the developers accountable for demolition. It took years to get the Tahoe City Lodge down. Now that it's better than, it's a blighted site, but it's better than having a blighted building. Lastly, this new product is more like a glamping product, and that's the conundrum. We have glamping that's not defined. We have an approved glamping project in Douglas County. It's actually going into an appeal process. Douglas County has the design review is an issue because we don't know what this is or what the glamping products that are being brought forward. Appreciate your time and your effort, and we look forward to seeing you next session.
Elizabeth Learnhardt, good afternoon. With 4 million day visitors alone, the Tahoe tourism is booming. We've seen what happened last Memorial Day at Yosemite, at Big Sur. It is the nature experience and the outdoors that are drawing tourists, not so much the gambling and other things. Tahoe does not need more tourist attractions. We don't need more bike paths. We have 600 miles of bike paths, more than the New York subway. What we do need is some kind of management, like maybe similar to Sand Harbor, that is having reservations or redirecting tourists to less visited sites, but it has to be managed in a more reasonable way. And the recent call to bring the Olympics back by a candidate for AD 40 is even beyond misguided. It's a shock that people are even thinking that way in Washoe County. But what I think TRPA needs to look at that I haven't heard today and I haven't heard at all, period, is the VHRs. There are 50% or more in Agate Beach at one of your workshops that you had last summer. The lady says she has no neighbors. She would love to have an ADU, but it's somehow not possible for her to build this. Banks and contractors are not jumping up in joy over the options you give them. Banking doesn't like deed restrictions or these ADUs. There is some kind of a there needs to be a conversation how to facilitate this. This was all brought up in the summer workshops last year. I also would like to see a VMT study for VHRs. I cannot see how a VHRs that has up to a dozen cars go there and they spread out in going to different areas during the day, how that is a lower VMT than a single family home that has two working persons in. I think we need to look at that, honestly. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Anybody else here in person for public comment? Microphone. You just need to turn the microphone on. Thank you.
Is it on? There we
There
go.
you
Green
go.
light. Yay. I've lived here 40 years. I'm extremely dismayed at the lack of environmental concern to the detriment of the environment that created this economy. TRPA is not protecting the environment. In fact, they approve every single project without looking at basic consideration. What's our evacuation plan? How many people can we have? This glamping campground is a debacle. It was owned by a private person who couldn't get access to build his own little private compound, sold it for this glamping, and then somehow USFS granted access for a road. Camping is not about driving up and having an e-bike and a ready-made domicile. It's about being with your family and pitching a tent. These VHRs, they have ruined our community cohesiveness. These are people that come here and they take. They're not part of our community. They don't use the dentist here. They don't go and have their children in after-school activities. They take. They want dinner. They want it now. They want someone to serve them. TRPA at the helm of this leadership appears to be bought and bought out. Why do we not care about this environment? Extinction is forever. Groundwater, riparian areas, this spraying of glycophosphates. I live a mile from here on Burke Creek, which is a direct tributary to Lake Tahoe. We have fingerling rainbow trout. I witnessed the spraying of glycophosphates. I witnessed the taking down of vegetation, including willow trees, to mineral bare soil where there is a stream that is a tributary of Tahoe. I ask you to please listen. What about your legacy? What about your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren? Tahoe is a gem. It needs to be protected. This development needs to be mitigated, and the environment should be the primary concern. I hope you heard me. I keep commenting, and I feel like I should just go comment to my car bumper and get the same result.
Thank you for your comments. I believe we have
Hello, my name is Grant Palmer. I live in South Lake Tahoe. And the TRPA, you are our environmental guardians. You were created to lead the cooperative effort to preserve, restore, and enhance the Lake Tahoe region. Your foundation principles mandate the agency prevent the deterioration and degradation of the basin's unique ecological values. What happened to the law that clearly states that the agencies prove that non-chemicals are infeasible before any herbicides are used? You skipped a step before you approved it. And before anyone collects billions of dollars from corporations, please go back and look at what non-chemical alternatives are available. We are a democracy in this country. We are not a corporate oligarchy. Please do what is right. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like that's it for comments here in person. Can we go to the online comments, please?
To provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue.
Hi, am I on?
Yes, you are. Go
Yes,
ahead.
you are.
Oh, thank you. Peggy Meadows from Incline Village and Auburn, California. So I have interest in both areas. And I needed to add a couple of things from before. One was, I don't know if there's any plans for any programs that involve home sharing. With the population getting older and older in the Lake Tahoe area and people not wanting to live elsewhere, they want to, live in place until they can no longer. And they, sometimes it can be helpful to have a section of their large home set aside to be able to share the home. And there could be a program where there's vetting and a department that would handle these things, and that could be a lot cheaper than building new homes. There's just so many homes that are almost empty so much of the year, and it would be nice to make use of what we have. So that's something I wanted to say. And then also on a side thing in Incline on Lakeshore Drive especially, but other areas too, I'm sure, I think you're allowing too much construction to happen over a longer period of time. They're building these huge additions or knocking down a home and then building a whole much bigger one. And it is deteriorating the enjoyment of those of us that do want to enjoy the outside recreation, like on the pathway along Lakeshore Boulevard. It's not enjoyable with all the noise, and it goes on for years. And so they need to limit how many permits are allowing additions or new buildings to be built at one time. You can have a way of doing that, I'm sure. So thank you for listening to that added part. Thank you.
Chair, we have no additional callers at this time.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comments. Our final agenda item is adjournment. I want to remind folks that the committee invites all interested parties to provide recommendations in writing for possible consideration during our final meeting and work session, which again will be on August 14th. So if you would like to submit recommendations for the committee to consider, please do that online. Our next meeting will be on July 17th, and please check our website. The location will either be here or will be on the North Shore at the UNR campus. You'll have to check the website to find out where it is because we haven't decided yet. So keep an eye on that, and we look forward to seeing you again. Once again, thank you all for being here, taking the time to come and share your comments and your concern about the lake that we all care so much about. Thank you very much. And with that, we're adjourned.